wellness. My team of doctors practice 21st century integrative medicine. Whether you suffer from chronic pain and fatigue, allergies or headaches, we can help. Take charge of your health before it's too late. Make an appointment today. Call 703-698-7117 or visit online at rosellecare.com. That's rosellecare.com. By now, we all know the number one cause of chronic and intractable health conditions is inflammation. Inflammation causes a decreased immune response that can lead to cancer, cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, and degenerative loss of muscle and bone. But did you know the number one cause of chronic inflammation is lack of sleep? Multiple studies have concluded that stress, short sleep cycles, hormone imbalance, low blood sugar, chronic pain, and environmental issues like ambient light cause most sleep disturbances. However, according to a recent study, natural sleep at the same time every night is the secret to restoring health and increasing longevity. So what can you do? Sleep in a black, cool room. Don't drink any liquids for an hour before bedtime. Eat small amounts of protein before retiring. Cover your digital clock and never go to bed hungry.
This health tip was brought to you by the Roselle Center for Healing. To learn more or to schedule a consultation, call 703-698-7117 or visit rosellecare.com.
Are you dental phobic? Do you neglect your dental health because of fear and anxiety? A beautiful smile begins with exceptional dental care, and you can trust in the expertise of Soft Touch Dental Care and Dr. Michael Chung. Soft Touch Dental Care is unlike any dentist office you'll ever experience. Their warm and welcoming environment is designed to soothe fears and anxiety the moment you arrive, and they're especially pleased to pamper their honored guest patients. Dr. Michael Chung is a professional and leading expert in all areas of comprehensive dentistry, including cosmetic, sedation, neuromuscular, TMJ, and implant dentistry. Offering state-of-the-art technology, Dr. Chung can give you the smile of your dreams. Arrange for a complimentary consultation today with Dr. Michael Chung and experience the expertise that makes Dr. Michael Chung so unique. Call 703-319-6990. That's 703-319-6990. Or visit bestinsmile.com. That's bestinsmile.com. Educate, engage, empower. Take control of your health with Dr. Tom Roselle and the Roselle Center for Healing. Information is power. Achieve an ultimate state of wellness with Dr. Tom Roselle's Education Lecture Series Video on Demand. Discover how to create an extraordinary life of optimal health and wellness. Visit drtomroselle.com/education. That's drtomroselle.com/education.
Breathe clean filtered air with an Air Tamer Personal Air Purifier. It's easy to have filtered air with an Air Tamer Personal Air Purifier. An Air Tamer Personal Air Purifier emits healthy negative ions to push airborne pollutants away from your breathing space. It's purified air wherever you go. The Air Tamer Personal Air Purifier reduces viruses by 99% within 20 minutes. Go to drtomroselle.com/products to get an Air Tamer Personal Air Purifier. For a limited time, use the coupon code Roselle and get a 20% discount and free shipping. Order today.
Breast cancer is a major health risk to all women. It can silently grow uninterrupted for years. The Thermography Centers of Fairfax reminds all women to conduct monthly and annual breast exams. Consider a thermography scan from the Thermography Centers as an adjunct to your routine breast exams. Digital infrared thermal imaging is safe and non-invasive. For more information and to schedule an appointment, call 703-520-7591 or visit thermographycenters.com.
This is Dr. Tom Roselle, author of Ageless Health, Health is a Do-It-Yourself Program. My book, now also available in audio version, is a step-by-step program of how to take control of your health and wellness without drugs or needless surgery. You have the capacity to change your health and level of well-being. Take control of your health today and order Health is a Do-It-Yourself Program.
For more information and to order, please visit agelesshealthbook.com. That's agelesshealthbook.com.
Are you suffering from flu-like symptoms? Get relief from muscle and body aches, headache, chills and fever, cough and congestion with Oleander 4X. Oleander 4X, made from oleander extract, is a tincture that provides relief for flu-like symptoms. Get relief with Oleander 4X. Go to drtomroselle.com/products to get Oleander 4X today. For a limited time, use the coupon code Ageless Health and get a 10% discount. Order today.
information provided on Dr. Tom Roselle Live by Dr. Tom Roselle, D.C., interview guests, show co-hosts, or substitute hosts is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It is for general information purposes only. Information from this broadcast should not replace the appropriate consultation and examination process by a licensed physician. Always consult your own physician prior to changing any current medical directive or prescription.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Tom Roselle here. Welcome to Ageless Health live stream as we do every week. And hopefully this one will be an exciting program for you. We just finished with an amazing attorney on our radio program on WMAL 105.9, Jonathan Emord. He is running for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate to run against Tim Kaine in the fall. We talked about grooming and what's happening to our children. I want you to make sure you go and listen to that. It's going to be available to you on all of our websites. I promise you that this man is one of the few people that can really put legal pieces together in a way that we can protect our children, protect our families, and make sure that kids are going to school to get educated, not to get manipulated. And because we know how it's affecting our society across the board. It's supposed to be about, in my opinion, God, family, country, in that order. And we have to make sure that we understand that if we don't step up to the plate, if we don't take control of what our children are being exposed to, that it's going to be a disastrous situation. Children are our treasure, if you will. They're our resources for the future. And if they're not taught basic fundamentals and be able to think through process at age appropriate times, not at a time when they're very vulnerable relative to what other people say and what they see, and they think that's normal. I don't know about you, but somebody who's 4 or 5, 6 years old doesn't need to be watching a drag queen. Somebody who is of that age can't have their mind manipulated to think that, you can make a biological decision to shift who you are. They don't have the resources to make that happen. And when Jonathan joins us, Jonathan Emord, who is a constitutional and administrative law attorney, extremely successful. Jonathan has been up against the federal government, the FDA, and others at the Supreme Court level and won 8 times. For example, because of his efforts, all of you know what a cleft palate is. We used to call back in the day, you'll forget the expression, a split lip. And what that's from is the inadequate amounts of folic acid, and B12 during pregnancy. And the insurance companies refused to cover that years ago. And because of Jonathan moving forward, what he did was he forced them through the federal government, through the Supreme Court, to have a diagnosis and force them to be able to pay for that. If it wasn't for that and his efforts, it wouldn't have taken place. Additionally, so here's the deal. You have to have somebody who's involved in the process, who understands it, who's been there, who understands that, you can have a lot of conversation around things, but things that are right and they're within the Constitution, this is what our country's made of. So hopefully we'll get him on board here pretty quickly. But in the meantime, I'm going to go over a couple things that we touched upon on the radio program just a few moments ago, and things that you need to know about. But I want you to remember that this coming Tuesday, 2 days from now, is the election for the nomination for U.S. Senate and the guy that will run against, Tim Kaine. So here's the deal. Jonathan has Dr. Tom Roselle's full 100% support. And I don't get into the political arena. I'm the guy that, except for professional stuff, as many of you know, I've headed up some major organizations, throughout the country and the world. But at the end of the day, people who know are the most important that we have to have representing us, working with us, who are honest, who are clear. When he joins us today, we're going to talk a little bit about vaccines and making sure that we understand what our rights are going forward into our jobs and our occupations. I had the pleasure of being on a medical panel, if you will, or an information panel on medical rights about a year ago down in Fredericksburg that Jonathan was the moderator of, and there was four of us. That one was the president of the International Medical Freedom Association. Another one was actually two of them were physicians out of Richmond. One in pediatrics, one in general medicine, and then there was a retired Army colonel who retired simply because he refused to do the mandatory vaccines that the government required, and myself. And so we went back and forth for almost about an hour and a half or so and talked about, what took place over there and how it affected children and the unfortunate situation that came about because of, the isolation and the lives that were lost and so forth. So we're going to do that as soon as he joins us. It's going to be my pleasure always to talk to brilliant people, but this man in particular. So we're going to get him started. Jonathan, you're here. Thank you. You made it. I was a little worried we were going to lose you in the ethros someplace.
Well, we had a little technical difficulty, but we're outdoors with an iPhone. It seems to be working.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's actually much more comfortable to be in here. Just you're going to have to loosen the tie up a little because it's hot today. But anyway, welcome. We're talking about, the right for people to be able to choose. And, you've had a lot of expertise in this, if you will. You've gone to the Supreme Court level on several cases. I had the privilege, the pleasure of sitting on a panel that you hosted about a year ago down in Fredericksburg on medical freedom. Some very amazing people. And, there's a lot of people that lost their jobs, their livelihood, children who were emotionally and mentally abused because of what took place. And I use that word specifically, abused, because these kids who need to be socialized, need to be engaged, need to understand, they went through a process of dumbing down, if you will, on so many different levels. But I'd like to get into talking about how people can demand that they are told the consequences of their actions. Is the law supportive of that? Or can any community, any state, any company demand within its own sanctions that you have to have this to be able to come into here? Otherwise, we're firing you without cause. Let's start with that. And then I've got a whole bunch of things that, that I think our listeners would love to hear. We're going to get this out and because this is important. I've been in practice 47 and a half years, and my thought process has always been people have a right to choose their own health care. They have a right to know. They have a right to know what their consequences are. And even in the healthcare arena in today's world, our malpractice carriers are saying you must disclose to the patient what the consequences are of whatever it is that you're going to do, whether it's very small or it's a huge situation. And in my mind, as a profession, not just my profession, medical profession, and hospitals and insurance companies, we're failing to do that categorically across the board. I'll let you jump off on that.
Well, we have a right to personal autonomy, really. We have a right to control our own bodies. When the government takes control of your body and insists upon you receiving an injection, it's really no different from enslaving you, because if you can't control your own biological destiny on your own terms, then you really are entirely enslaved to the state if it can control that destiny. So what we have here with the whole mass vaccination thing, masking thing, was a huge deprivation of our civil liberties. And when they tried, as Biden did, to require that everyone who worked in a company that employed 100 or more people to be either forcibly vaccinated or forcibly tested weekly as a condition of employment, what they're doing is taking away your economic liberty as well as your political liberty. They're forcing you into a one size fits all orthodoxy. If they can get away with that, they can get away with anything based on a argument of medical necessity. And so we have to draw the line here. We have to stop this. And when I'm in the United States Senate, not only will I make masking and vaccination illegal, banned, but I will also ensure that those whose rights were violated are given their due, which is that all those in the military and the medical service and police departments, fire departments, and elsewhere who were forced out of their jobs because they would not get vaccinated, they need to be able to be reemployed, get their back pay, and get the promotions they were due, because this was a gross deprivation of their liberty. Many of these people have lost their homes, they've lost their income, they've lost their retirement as a result of this draconian move by the government. We have historically depended upon innovation in medicine and freedom of speech and free debate concerning the merits of treatments. During this whole COVID thing, the Biden administration, with the full backing of Tim Kaine, censored information. Anytime you would criticize information, big tech would censor it as a proxy for the Biden administration. We know that through the Twitter files. And this is a gross deprivation, not only of our First Amendment freedom of speech, but also of our personal autonomy, because people made decisions that were life affecting. Many lost their lives because they entrusted the government with the solution without question, because they didn't have the information that would otherwise have been there. We lost 1.1 plus million people during the COVID epidemic. This was the greatest act of betrayal in American history. Fauci colluded with the communist Chinese through gain of function research to develop this horrific virus. And, it's a nefarious and abusive situation that we must ensure that those who suffered never have to suffer comparable effects of government restrictions again on their freedom. If we had just allowed the doctor-patient relationship to remain, if we had allowed free debate, we would have had many, probably tens of thousands of people would have survived. And we know this from epidemiological evidence. In those countries that allowed hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, the incidence of death from this disease is substantially lower than in the West, where we went for this, what the Ninth Circuit has rightfully described as not even a vaccine, a vaccine they called in name only, but in point of fact did not function as a vaccine and actually created far worse consequences that we're having to live with now. I mean, all these age-related diseases that are coming upon us, the number of people dying from disease related to that was precipitated by the vaccine as opposed to the virus. And this is what we're having to contend with now for generations because of this. And they're still insisting on vaccinating youth when there's absolutely no found. That is child abuse. That is child abuse.
The demand of going into college is still there. Even in the state of Virginia, some of the schools are supporting religious rights and medical. I can't get that because I'm allergic to attenuated viruses and so forth. But at the end of the day, this is a gift, if you will, that's going to keep on giving for decades to come. And, I'm seeing young men come into the office that they're in their 30s, Jonathan, and they've been vaxxed and they've been boosted and they're not feeling well. Their energy's down. They have other neurological situations that are starting to present. And we run hormone tests on these young men, and they have testosterone levels and sperm counts of an 80-year-old that's sick, that's not doing well. This is obscene. It's absurd. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. And, you have, and people want to know why the miscarriage rates are so high. Well, it goes also to guys, right? So here's the deal. Men, their sperm produces the placenta that the baby is nourished in for 9 months that mom is carrying. And the cotyledoni, the attachment to the uterine wall, is part of that placental tissue. Guys are the ones that produce it. So if their sperm is not normal, if I'll use that term without getting the technical pieces, then what happens as the baby gets heavier, 4, 5, 6 months, the mother aborts. She can't hold on to it, so she miscarries. And that's what we're seeing. So if you get into PubMed, you get into Frontier, you get into the Townsend Letter, there's huge amounts of documentation now that's coming from around the world of very substantiating, finger pointing that's going on. So my question becomes this: how do we get these companies that thought they were omnipotent and fired people and demanded they had the vaccine, and if they refused, lost their livelihood, lost their job, to comply not only morally, but with the law that I thought existed?
Yeah, we have to enact new legislation that will require them, whenever they receive any federal funding, which is all of these institutions virtually, that they ensure that those who were terminated on this basis are given an opportunity to be rehired, that their records are expunged so that there's no reference with regard to this in their personnel files, and that they get the back pay and the promotions that they're otherwise due, whether it's the people from the military who are forced out, police departments, fire departments, hospitals. All of these people have been had their rights violated, and it's high time that the federal government accepted the responsibility for its actions. We must impose this penalty on government to create a disincentive in future. We have to rise up in defense of personal autonomy and our rights to the privacy protection of the doctor-patient relationship. You know, they also want to violate that. Tim Kaine has legislation pending right now that would effectively create a whole federal bureaucracy through the public health service at the local, state, and national level that will invade your privacy rights by compelling your physician to turn over electronic medical records simultaneous with any treatment for any kind of what is called a medical emergency. And so you would lose your privacy every time the government declared any type of disease an emergency, and all that information has to be given to the public health service. Not only that, the doctor himself is monitored through this under this system that he's advocating, and any instance where he or she would prescribe other than what is the FDA and CDC approved protocol would result in that doctor being identified and punished. Likewise, the ultimate consequence of this for patients is that you would soon, no doubt, if you attempted during a quote unquote government declared medical emergency to proceed to go on public transportation or anything like during the COVID period, you would now have electronic identification that would deny you access, right? So these are the logical consequences of destroying your right of privacy.
Right.
So we have got to stop this authoritarian movement, this totalitarian movement, to deprive us of the full benefits of freedom in this country, this is the avenue through which they create a centralized government control over the most intimate aspects of our lives, such as what you decide to do with your own body, what you decide is appropriate for your own family. And the choice of what to take and whether to treat a disease or how to has got to be your own. Otherwise, you have no freedom. You do not have liberty in this country if the government, every time it cares to declare a medical emergency, can wipe out your rights, your choice, your options, and can cause you to become effectively a deplorable, to use their language,
Yes.
a deplorable who has no rights. And we have got to work vigorously against this and ensure that the law goes in the opposite direction of protecting the doctor-patient relationship, protecting privacy, protecting personal autonomy.
You know, as you've heard me before, and we've talked about it, going back to the Affordable Care Act, which Tim Kaine fully supports, and he wants to continue it. He wants to make sure that it's in everybody's pocket and getting rid of self-choice relative to insurance policies and the like. But the situation is this: the Affordable Care Act, as you know, I read the stupid thing. You know, I was one of these guys that actually printed it out. It took me
Right.
7 months to read it. I have to get rid of the preambles. It gets down to about 2,000 pages. I don't think I've read that much in my life, but at one time. But anyway, I read the thing, and there was a piece in it, as you know, that says that that in case of a pandemic like we went through, that the government, in concert with the local medical authorities, can decide what the fix is, so to speak, and that if you refuse because of whatever feelings that you have about it or scientific fact that you have about it, but you refuse, that if they feel that you are a threat or can perpetuate the problem, they can pull you out of population and put you into a quarantine camp until they feel that the problem has gone away or you're no longer a problem, if you will. That has huge ramifications. That's number one. But most people don't understand that that's there, and that's probably where they got this craziness from over the last several years. You and I have a friend, someone who endorsed you for your candidacy, Del Bigtree. I've known Del for a lot of years, and when he was involved in the Vaxxed movie and so forth, he came into town, and we spent a couple of days together and talking. He has spoken on my platform on Leadership to Legacy a couple times. Great guy. Here's a guy that is passionate about making sure people get the right information, and they are destroying this man. And this is how it works. They are destroying people's reputation, people who have a fundamental love of humanity, if you will. And he's trying to deliver a message. How do you stop that ridiculousness? And, as much as he's not my political cup of soup, Bob Kennedy, he understands what's going on, at least on that piece. How do you take the next step? How do you ensure it? You're the attorney. You're a brilliant constitutional administrative law attorney, extraordinarily successful. Is there a way of doing it? Are we subject to this forever?
There is, of course, a way of taking care of this, and that is to rid the government of this weaponization of justice. So these are conscious decisions being made to violate their oaths of office. These people aren't supposed to be in the business of using their political predisposition to determine who they prosecute, whether it's President Trump or Del Bigtree or anybody else, and deplatforming them or otherwise punishing them. That's a gross violation of the Constitution. And so there's a bill that Rand Paul actually introduced. It was not passed because of Bernie Sanders blocking it. But this bill would make it a felony for anyone in government to collude with those in the big tech to censor any person based on their political views or their scientific views or any views they articulate. So this is an enforcement of the First Amendment. The First Amendment, like any other amendment of the Constitution, can be enforced by the government, even against itself. And that's what we need to do. We need to have whole departments here that are guilty, with the individuals within them responsible for these actions. And we need to defund those departments and reestablish them. So, for example, if there's a part of the Department of Defense engaged in censorship activity, or if there is a part of CISA, which is all of CISA really, or, excuse me, the FBI, what we need to do is to take those parts of those agencies and departments and defund them. And then we need to impose a new regime in which individuals in government who engage in these activities are directly, personally responsible and can be sued. And if they take legal action against someone that stops them from communicating, we should be able to have not only that person's legal fees reimbursed, but also damages associated with the action. So we have to impose this kind of draconian stricture on government actors so that they know if they go into this zone of weaponizing justice, they themselves can be personally liable and we can prosecute them. There really is no other way. Given the magnitude, breadth, and scope of this crisis of weaponization of justice, there really is no other alternative than to make these individuals account. That is the only way to stop it, and that requires legislation to do it. And I'm all for it. I'm all for Rand Paul's bill, but I believe it needs to be expanded to include actions that interfere with our freedom of choice writ large, not just our freedom of speech.
This is the first time in this country's history that we've gone through a set aside. I'm going to put it that way, where people were not told the truth. Years ago, you would have an open discussion, call it a debate if you want to, of the pros and cons, and finger pointing. Well, you're you're a crazy man. You shouldn't be doing that, or you're don't know what you're talking about. But now we've gone to personal attacks, livelihood destructions, and it has to, there's an underlying process in the program that we just got off of on 105.9 WMAL. We talked about our children being groomed, and my headspace, and this is my opinion, says that there's an underlying plan, if you will. We started with back into the 60s, and I was the guy that went undergraduate school at Kent State University, saw the National Guard come in. I was 20 yards away and saw 4 of my classmates killed and another 8 seriously injured for the rest of their lives. And the processing, if you will, of psychological problems utilizing drugs. And what we know across the board with all these kids that were killed in the different school systems, including Virginia Tech some years ago, the commonality was that they were all on emotional medications of some sort, SSRIs and so forth. It has to stop. I treat patients on a day-to-day basis, and I see people coming in today they look like they've been prescribed a pharmacy, the 15, 16, 18, literally medications that are altering people's perceptions and cognitive capacity. And there has to be a way of holding. And now with the advent of AI, you go into a medical physician, a traditional allopath, and you give them their symptoms. They push a button, say, here, take this and see what happens.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. The process of thinking through and understanding the human condition seems to be out the window. How do we stop this? I mean, I'm not the techie guy. I'm not the AI boy. I know how to use it, but it's coming to a place of it's going to control virtually everything. So one step over the years led to the next, led to the next, led to the next, and people don't even realize how they're being manipulated, or we'll use the word groomed, as we did last time.
Well, we have a situation where the Food and Drug Administration is a captive of the drug industry. And as a captive of the drug industry, we've watched the FDA approve numerous psychoactive drugs without evidence that they have any effect beyond placebo. And in fact, they even lowered the standard for approval of psychiatric drugs to allow them to be approved, even though they showed no reactivity, preferential reactivity beyond placebo. And that has resulted in, like, for example, you mentioned the SSRIs, which now our own science that has been published in the last year on this shows that their whole assumption for mechanism of action was erroneous. And that actually, when they alter serotonin levels in the brain, they're actually not having any effect on underlying psychological conditions.
Sure.
So this was, not only that, but as we know, from those medical reviewers who became whistleblowers from FDA on this point, that they understood at the time that this would increase the risk of suicidality. And since then, it has shown in spades that many of these drugs have actually increased the risk of suicide. This led to a black box warning on some of these drugs. But the reality is they're too unsafe. And as a result, they shouldn't be in the market. In England, for example, they've rid the market of them. They won't allow youth to have them.
Yep.
And likewise here, we should have done the same thing. Many of the youth who are involved in school shootings were on these drugs, and these drugs are known for increasing risk of violent behavior and suicidality.
Yes.
So we should have reacted differently, but we didn't, because the FDA protects the drug industry from competition and also hides the reality of the adverse effects of drugs quite frequently, and it effectively functions as an advertising and promotion unit for the drug companies, even in the midst of problems. For example, during the period of time when we had that super so-called non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, which was removed from the market. It was a Merck drug. You'll remember the name of it. I'm forgetting it at the moment. That drug, unfortunately, the FDA had full knowledge that it would increase the risk of heart toxicity. They knew it. There was a direct dose response relationship, excuse me, shown in the literature. But despite that fact, the FDA kept it on the market, even to the point where the FDA medical reviewers looking at the situation and lobbying the FDA commissioner to change, he refused. And within 2 weeks of Merck removing the drug from the market, the FDA commissioner approved the drug for unilateral use for pediatric rheumatoid arthritis, even with the heart toxicity. And so this is the kind of thing that the FDA is constantly guilty of. And so to solve this problem, we really need to get rid of the FDA's drug approval process and put it into private institutions, labs, and licensed and certified ones. Pardon me. There we go. And if we do that, then what we'll be able to do is ensure the integrity of drugs, which we don't do now.
See, that's what
Pollen
happens.
is not good.
You're trying to enjoy the outside, and the weather's getting to you. See, when you work.
Yeah, it's a little pollen and probably a little bit of chemical pesticides in the area too, I would imagine. I'm getting there.
This is, Jonathan, I'd like to just ask you a straightforward question to our listeners, and this is going to reach a whole lot of people. If you get the nomination and you move forward, and God willing, you win the election and unseat Tim Kaine in the fall, what seriously is your agenda relative to healthcare?
So my agenda for healthcare is to first end the vaccine mandates, end the mask mandates, ensure that those who were victimized are able to get their jobs back, get the promotions they were due, and the back pay that they're due. Also ensure that we get rid of the vaccine mandates altogether. We should not have CDC coercing and cajoling the states and pediatricians into insisting on the full vaccine schedule. Each patient needs to make that decision. Each parent for their own children needs to make that decision. We need to restore the doctor-patient relationship, the primacy of it, and get the central government out of it. Get the government out of the business of creating one-size-fits-all solutions to multifaceted problems. Let me just say, each of us is a unique biological creature. We have our own medical history that is unique to us. We have our own sensitivities to various substances, like I just had from pollen in the air. But we have our own sensitivities to these things that need to be taken into account. It's ironic that while doctors are under strict scrutiny, as you are, from your state medical boards, so to ensure that you have for every patient a medical history before you engage in a diagnosis, the central government comes in, like with COVID, and establishes a one-size-fits-all regime and forces you to get that drug or that treatment that is deemed medically reasonable and necessary by government bureaucrats. Well, we have to get rid of that so that we get back to patient-centric care. And there are a number of things we can do. So to build this private sector medical system and get rid of socialized medicine, the best thing that we can do is to create incentives through tax changes in tax law for the provision of care to the indigent and others without government. So, for example, if I'm a doctor, why not give this doctor an opportunity to get a tax deduction at his preference if he will care for the indigent and provide additional care that they critically need, and evaluate himself, their relative need and their condition. And then if they do that, and same thing with companies. If companies not only provide medical insurance for their employees, but in addition would go beyond that and enable them in times of difficulty to get additional assistance, whatever, there ought to be a tax benefit, a reduction in taxation associated with that, because we're alleviating the public sector from the burden and cost of that, and we're incentivizing them through this system what is really the best way to solve this, which is independent action that is directly responsive to need and not a bureaucratic centralized system like Obamacare or anything else like that. We have to move back to private insurance that's competitive on interstate grounds. Get rid of all the barriers to interstate competition in insurance. Catered insurance that is capable of meeting your specific needs, that you don't not requiring you to take on the cost of things you don't need, and eliminating government from this process as much as possible by maximizing the incentive for private care, both from employers and from individuals who have resources, as a way to get tax deductions, as a way to benefit society by their actions of helping others, but also benefit themselves by the tax deduction, which creates an incentive. The more we do that, the less centralized government planning, the more protection for your doctor-patient relationship and your freedom of choice, the better off we will all be. Disease will not overcome us like COVID again. We will have doctors caring specifically for the unique symptoms of a patient, not throwing everybody into a hospital with a ventilator, for example, and causing a mass number of them to die. We will have solutions to problems rather than problems created out of problems.
Getting people to think through the process is the most important thing. As you mentioned, ventilators, hospitals got paid big dollars for putting people on ventilators and coming up with a COVID diagnosis that caused the death, even though that they may have had COVID, but it didn't cause the problem. And if we had treated people just as a viral pneumonia, as they've been doing for years, they would have saved millions and millions of lives across the board. Anyway, Jonathan, I am so encouraged by you, and I hope that Tuesday night, I know that if people get out there and vote the way they should vote, they vote for you. Jonathan Emord, go. If you haven't voted yet, get out and do it. Tuesday is the day, the last day. So make sure that you give medical freedom the opportunity to sustain itself in this country. And in my opinion, there's only one person that can do it. It's Jonathan Emord. Jonathan, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much for that endorsement. And you know how much that means to me. I've watched you and followed you for so long, and I think you're the person of utmost integrity and brilliant in your care of patients. So it's quite an honor for me to have your endorsement.
Take care, my friend. We'll pray for you for Tuesday night. I can only hope that we come to common sense in this country when it comes to taking care of ourselves. So we begin to learn the differences between innate and acquired immunity and what we can do to support it and how we can, make sure that we live strong, vibrant, viable lives. And there's only one person that, from as far as I'm concerned, in the state of Virginia, going to the federal level, that can do that. And that's Jonathan Emord. He has my full support and my endorsement. And I don't give that lightly because I don't get involved in politics. But we're at a place right now where everybody's got to take a stance, and that's mine. We'll be back next week with another amazing program. And I hope I can tell you that, we're ready to go for the fall with this amazing man. I want you to go and check his credentials out. I said he won 8 times at the federal level, at the Supreme Court level. And because of him, you get to go to natural health care providers like myself, acupuncturists, nutritionists, and your insurances have to pay for it. He did that at the Supreme Court level. Having said that, remember, I'm here for you on an ongoing basis. Let me know what you want to hear, and I'll try to make it happen. Until then, I love you all. See you next week. Bye.